Hello, friends, and welcome yet again to another episode of Strange Planet, and it is a far stranger planet than we can possibly imagine. If you'd like to get deeper into Strange Planet, you might want to consider becoming a premium subscriber. You gain access to commercial-free listening, special bonus episodes produced exclusively for premium subscribers, and you receive my monthly newsletter, Inner Sanctum. Just click on the link in the episode notes, strangeplanet.supportingcast.fm, strangeplanet.supportingcast.fm. All right, on this installment of Strange Planet, we welcome back an old friend of the program. He's been with us many times before, and he has just returned from Laos. Not many people venture to Laos, but he's been there recently, investigating the megalithic plain of jars, and there are legends of giants who reportedly built these immense stone vessels as drinking cups. We'll get into that. The secret war in Laos. We'll also talk about the recent total eclipse of the sun. He was in Texas checking that out. And Brad Olsen is a captivating speaker, the author of 10 books, including 3 in his Esoteric Series, Modern Esoteric, Future Esoteric, and the newly released Beyond Esoteric. He's an award-winning author, book publisher, event producer. His keynote presentations and interviews have enlightened audiences at Contact in the Desert, Conscious Life Expo, and the Mount Shasta Summer Conference. We'll talk about that as well. That's upcoming. Dozens of radio and television programs, including Coast to Coast, also Ancient Aliens, America Unearthed, Beyond Belief, Book of Secrets, The Truth is Out There, Mysteries of the Outdoors. And he has traveled to all 7 continents, including Antarctica, by sailboat, seeking adventure and the answers to the mysteries of humankind's past. He's founder and co-producer of the Weird Street Faire in the SOMA neighborhood of San Francisco. And the Chicago native's esoteric writing continues to reach a wide audience while he continues breaking ground in alternative journalism, public speaking, and illustration and photography. Wow. Brad Olsen, it's a wonder you have time to talk to me. How are you? Welcome back.
Hey, Richard, I'm doing great. It's wonderful to be back on the Strange Planet. And yeah, that bio you just read of me, that's kind of a nutshell Strange Planet journey I've been on, traveling around the world and accumulating this esoteric knowledge for my books and coming back and telling some great stories about it.
All right, before we get to Laos, let's talk about the total eclipse. You traveled to Texas, where there was the full enchilada there. You got the what do they call that? The zone of totality was in Texas.
Yeah.
Whereabouts in Texas precisely were you?
Well, I was a speaker at a Team Light eclipse festival in Bastrop, Texas, but it was just out of the eclipse zone. Places booked up 5 years in advance. Wow. In anticipation of this eclipse. So they were planning about a year out and couldn't find anything within the totality zone. But myself and Tony Rodriguez, another one of the speakers, we had a friend who was doing an eclipse party just on the west side of Austin, Texas. So we went out there in the morning, and it was in this beautiful hill country community. Joe Rogan lived a mile below us, and he took pictures of the eclipse that day. And it was an incredible experience, but we didn't think we were going to see it. It was totally cloudy, and we had the eclipse glasses on, and once in a while the clouds would part and you could see how the moon was starting to shadow the sun. But just right in the nick of time, the clouds parted. And we got the full solar eclipse experience. My second one, I had been out in the 2017 eclipse in Idaho with my dad, my uncle, and another podcast artist named Ryan Gable, who was we were just absolutely amazed. And that one was clear skies. And in the case with no clouds, of course, it goes pitch black dark and you can see the stars, the moon. And in this case, there was that devil's comet up in the sky, and then the alignment of the planets, and NASA was shooting off some rockets. We didn't get to see any of that 2 days ago, but we did get a chance to see the full totality effect and getting all dark, animals going quiet, temperature dropping about 10 degrees only for about 5 minutes. So it was quite the eclipse experience. And I understand you got a little sample of that too.
Well, we here in Thornhill, just north of Toronto, it's not 100% in the zone of totality. That was, I think, the hot spot for viewing the eclipse was in Niagara Falls, which is about 90 minutes from here. It would have been great, except we had overcast skies. I mean, it was thick clouds, thick cloud coverage. So we did get to experience that eerie darkness at about 3:15, where day literally turned into night, and of course all the birds just stop chirping. They land and they're quiet. We have pet ducks running around in the backyard. They were just kind of, confused, let's say, by what was happening, and dogs stopped barking. And as you say, that noticeable drop in temperature. And then, unfortunately, we missed the show, but about 40 minutes, an hour after the event, all of a sudden the overcast skies parted, and we had the most beautiful deep blue skies. So we kind of missed out, but we got to experience kind of the side effects, I guess.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned the Devil Comet, which how often does this thing swing around? It's like every 70 years or something?
71 years, yeah. And last time it came around during the mid 1950s, all the kids were reading comic books and they said, "Oh, that's where Superman goes up to get his powers." So now it comes around this time. And it's got a forked tail, hence the name Devil's Comet. And it was supposed to be right there visible by the sun. In fact, it's coming closest to the Earth on the 21st. So we still have an opportunity to see it in the night sky on a clear night. So it's not quite out of the picture yet.
Whenever you have a total eclipse, a total solar eclipse, people start talking about, end times and
right.
Well, because there was a reported total eclipse during the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, and that plays into it. And so we're looking for signs in the heavens. And then so when you have the Devil Comet coming around at the same time, I mean, what were you hearing from people in terms of, what this total eclipse plus the Devil Comet, what it presaged or prophesized?
That throughout history, anytime there was a full solar eclipse, of course, people weren't as educated about the movement of celestial bodies as we are today. They would often ascribe it to superstition that it was the end of times. But the weird thing about this one, Richard, and as you know, watching an eclipse is a totally benign event. There's no danger at all whatsoever, unlike observing other natural events. Say, I was in the Loma Prieta earthquake. Yeah, you could die in an earthquake. You could die in a hurricane or a tornado or a tsunami, but you're not going to die in a full solar eclipse. But there was so much hubbub about being prepared, and the National Guard is being called out, and they're going to be wearing hazmat suits. I don't know why they did that. I, of course, didn't subscribe to that. I was flying on a plane late last night coming back. So if something was going to happen, I would have been stuck in Texas. But I just find it interesting that we still get this kind of superstition or paranoia around an eclipse, even in this modern day.
I was reading where, imagine, as you say, in ancient times when we didn't really fully understand what was happening, how, the tension when day turns into night. And I was reading how, the sun is gone. Is it coming back? During I think it was the 5th century BC, there was a war between, it was in Anatolia, modern day Turkey, between these two tribes. And during Herodotus writes about this, in the middle of the eclipse, they just stopped and they signed a treaty. You know, they said, well, what are we fighting for? The world is ending. So that gives you kind of an indication. You mentioned the NASA rockets. Why were they fired 3 missiles towards the sun? What was that all about? Were they just trying to study something?
Yeah, and they gave him this weird name, APEC, and it was in mythology that fights the sun. And so that gave people reason for caution. They also fired up the CERN Hadron Collider out there in Switzerland. I haven't heard that there was any net result of that, but all these things, why do they have to do it on April 8th? It just seemed really strange and maybe provoking people's paranoia even more. Um, but I'm not really sure why NASA did that rocket test that day, but maybe it had something to do with totality, that they were testing the atmosphere during this very unusual event. And, we're not going to get another full solar eclipse over North America for 20 years, but they do happen quite regularly around the planet. The next big one over a continental landmass that a lot of people are talking about going to, they're called eclipse chasers. They go around the world. Will be in Spain in 2 years. We were at a resort just before the eclipse at Enchanted Rock, right where the totality line was coming through. And there was a group that rented out the entire resort, some 50 rooms at the Troy Estates 5 years ago, Richard. This is how long people plan for this. And the people that booked it, this was their 12th full solar eclipse. So there are people that will plan their months and years around going to visit these eclipses around the world and this country.
All right, Brad, we're going to take a time out. We'll come back. We'll talk about Mount Shasta Summer Conference 2024. You'll be appearing there, and we'll also talk about the Plain of Jars in Laos. Back with more of our conversation right after these. Hi there. If you want to watch the rest of these episodes, please head over to my Rumble channel, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. You can watch complete episodes there. New, complete, unedited episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, the Rumble channel is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. In the meantime, I want to thank you for supporting this YouTube channel all of these years. However, the problem is I never know when I'm going to run afoul of the censors at YouTube. I never know when I'm going to end up in YouTube jail. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. And in fact, 2 more strikes and this YouTube channel will be taken down altogether. So help me fight big tech censorship, enjoy the complete unedited episodes, and join the rest of the Strange Planet community over on Rumble. Again, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet on rumble.com. See you over there. And we're back with Brad Olsen, adventurer, world traveler, author, public speaker, event producer. And speaking of events, 2024's Mount Shasta Summer Conference happening July 18th to the 21st. Tell me about what's happening there and what you'll be talking about.
Yeah, I've got my talk about the megaliths and giants, prehistory. We'll touch on a little bit in this program, giving that talk at the Mount Shasta Summer Conference. People want to go, they can type in my name, Brad, in the promo code and get a discount that way. You're going to have Rob Potter's coming on next week and Laura Eisenhower,
Yes,
also speakers at the Mount Shasta Summer Conference. And they're doing it up at this really great location called the Methodist Camp up by Castle Lake. And so it's more of a camp out type conference where we'll have a fire every night and each one of us will be there and tell stories. The way it used to be, Richard, just remember before television, which is a recent invention, we used to sit around the fireplace, the hearth, and tell stories. And before that, out in nature around campfires. When you stare at a fire, it's kind of like you're watching a television. You're getting a moving picture, and they do invoke the storytelling art, which seems to be more and more lost with a lot of people. But I love it. I love public speaking, and doing these conferences is a great way to connect with a larger group of people. And of course, now we can use visuals in our presentations as well, enhance that storytelling environment.
Right. It's kind of an off-grid experience, although you'll be running things with generators and so forth. But technology will be at a minimum, as you say, and get back to the essence of storytelling around the communal bonfire. You mentioned Laura Eisenhower will be there. And you get to meet some Venusians, Paul from Paul of Venus and so forth. And the link for the conference, that's the promiserevealed.net website, will be is in the episode links, the promiserevealed.net. All right, Laos. You traveled to Laos in Southeast Asia, nestled up there with Cambodia. I guess is it kind of between Cambodia and Vietnam? I'm trying to remember my geography now.
Yeah, it is. It's the one Southeast Asian country that's completely landlocked, China to the north, and they just put in a high-speed rail all the way down from Kunming, China, straight through Laos to the capital Vientiane, and they're about to build a bridge over the Mekong River into Thailand and all the way down through Malaysia to Singapore is the end goal of that. So the new Orient Express is already being built.
All right.
And
so
then you have Burma or Myanmar on one side of it, and then Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam on the other sides of it.
I don't know anyone who's been to Laos. Now I know you, one person, you. Did you go there specifically to see the plain of jars?
Well, I did, but I was first invited to go to a travel convention called the ASEAN Tourism Forum as a journalist. As you know, when we met several years ago on the set for Mysteries of the Outdoors, I was showing you my travel guidebook, Sacred Places North America. I'd been a travel writer for 15 years and did 7 of my 10 books on traveling. So I get invited on these junkets or these press trips. And so some of my travel writer friends said, well, we're going to put in our application for Laos late last year. So I did too. And lo and behold, we all got on. So when I knew I was going, I requested 2 extra weeks on the front end of the trip to go specifically to see this megalithic site in northeastern Laos. And I'll tell you, Richard, it exceeded my expectations, how expansive these jar sites were and how big they were. And once again, the legend of giants, you get the megaliths and you get some kind of association with giants.
So on the Rumble version of the podcast, we'll insert some images of these giant stone vessels. Again, the legend is they were built by giants as drinking cups. But for those just listening to the audio version, just kind of describe, first of all, set the scene. What are these planes? There's more than one. They're kind of scattered around different locations. Some have more jars than others. But where you were, just kind of paint a kind of a mental picture for us.
Sure. First of all, it has just been included with UNESCO's World Heritage Site list of preserved monuments around the world. So they put in a museum there, a really nice museum, only in 2019. It's a fairly recent addition. So I've taken the night bus from Vientiane, the capital, to this little town called Phone Savin and get to the bus station right at dawn and got a little tuk-tuk to take me out to the museum site. They allowed me to leave my backpack. Yeah, I'm still backpacking around, Richard, like I was in my 20s. And then, of course, paid the admission and went out to the site. And it's called Site One, and it is the most amount of these jars concentrated in one area. There are a couple hundred. In total, there's 1,325 still intact jars. In antiquity, there had been many thousands. Many have been destroyed by looting. Chinese raid parties would come down, and there were funerary objects in them. And I'll explain the best explanation of what they were built for in a moment. But they're basically also the Indochina wars took a toll, and including the bombing campaign. So when I'm walking out to the site, I was really surprised to see all these pockmarks, these bomb craters that are still there from the bombing campaign during the secret war in Laos. And that was because this particular area has always been a major trade route on a high altitude plain, including during the Vietnam War when it was the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And so American bombers were secretly didn't tell Congress, didn't tell the American public that we were bombing Laos from 1964. They finally admitted it in 1970, but the bombing campaign went on till 1973. And it made Laos the most bombed nation in the world.
2.5 million tons.
People,
2.5 million tons of ordnance. That's 580,000 bombing, I guess they call them sorties. That's like a plane load every 8 minutes, 24 hours a day for 9 years. Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. And so some of the maps I saw, the concentration was mainly right along this Ho Chi Minh Trail and any town in between. And it made Laos the most bombed nation in the world. In fact, they still have, they call them UXOs, unexploded ordnances, that are going off every 2 weeks and maiming and killing children or farmers. Wow. Still to this day, it's quite a problem there.
So how large are these? Are they all the same size, roughly, these stone vessels or jars?
Well, not quite. Most of them are about 2 meters tall. That's almost 7 feet tall. They're big. But there was one that was over 3 meters tall that was towering over me. I basically had to stand on my tippy toes to touch the top of it. They're all carved out using Iron Age instruments. So the Iron Age of Laos, and indeed most of Southeast Asia, was from about 500 BC to 500 AD. And that's when these jars were created. And they were basically chipped away because iron is much harder than even granite. And some of them are made out of granite, others limestone, some are sandstones and conglomerate rocks. They know where the quarries are, Richard, but even the UNESCO museum admits nobody knows how they moved those jars from the quarry through the jungle, over creeks and valleys, and then up to this high plain area. And of course, there's not just one, there are multiple locations around the town of Phon Savin. If I had more time there, I could have rented a motorcycle. I was considered doing that, but I wanted to meet a friend in Luang Prabang, this really beautiful medieval, another UNESCO World Heritage city, another day ride away. But they're up on mountain peaks, scattered around. Some are just solo, others are clustered together. But quite a few of these jars still remain to this day.
And how did the legend start that these were giant? Well, I mean, I guess it's kind of an easy assumption to make. You know, they were drinking cups for giants. But when did that start?
Well, that was the legend, and it was even written about in the UNESCO World Heritage Site Museum, that one of the legends of their creation was that they were built as drinking cups for the giants. And I'll tell you, Richard, I've been to so many of these megalithic sites around the world, including Sacsayhuaman in Peru, where giant bones were found next to the site. Brian Forrester led that tour I was on, and We went to museums where these elongated skulls are on display in Peru. They're just out loud and proud about it that they had these giants and these massive skulls. Otherwise, there's a legend like the Plain of Jars that the megalithic sites were created by the giants and for the giants. And in this case, they were drinking cups. Would have been pretty darn big drinking cups to be 2 meters tall. But then again, if you're talking about beings that are many times larger than us, a comparison I often make is if you think about a cinder block. Mm-hmm. For an adult, it's pretty easy to lift a cinder block, but for a little kid, they can't lift it. So if you just scale it up, and some of these giants are supposed to be 2 or 3 times taller than we are, it wouldn't be that difficult to transport or maybe even to use them as a drinking cup.
Any giant skeletons ever uncovered in Laos?
Well, they weren't alluding to that in the site there, but the Plain of Jars indeed is a necropolis, and hundreds of Laotian bones were found, but not just a straight burial where people were laid down to rest. They used the jars as what was described as a secondary burial process. So the corpse upon dying would be placed in the jar, and indeed they're big enough to hold a body. In fact, they were used during the Indochina Wars as shields to fire from, and soldiers died in them during the bombing and shooting campaign. So the necropolis took on another aspect during these wars that took place there in the modern age. But the reason they were built, according to the historians and the archaeologists, was to place a body in the jar, let it decompose to the point where it's almost all bones, take the bones out, and then neatly stack them and bury them. And they found hundreds of those neatly stacked, buried, sometimes in funerary urns, buried in the ground around the jars. So the jars were kind of like a mausoleum where they were family plot, and then they would use it over and over and over again, and then bury the bones around the jar itself.
That makes sense. Would you agree that that is probably the most likely, not necessarily negating the existence of giants, but that would make the most sense for why these jars were constructed and placed where they were?
Yeah, indeed. And not only that, but buried with funerary objects. So anytime you have a culture that buries their dead with funerary objects, such as they did in Egypt with the mummified bodies, King Tut was buried with all his earthly possessions, it shows that you have a very sophisticated culture. Not only were the bones buried around the jars, but the lesser people, the worker class, were cremated in a cave. And there's quite a bit of evidence of that, of charred bones and burials of cremations also on the Plain of Jars. So it appears that the jars were commissioned by these wealthy families because this area was very instrumental in the trade routes of Southeast Asia. So not only were they mining the iron ore and trading that, but all the way down to the Gulf of Tonkin. So seashells had been found in some of the funerary objects. And then they crossed right on over Southeast Asia out to Burma and then south to Thailand. So it was quite a crossroads of culture and objects that were found in the funerary remains.
Is Laos a safe place to travel? I mean, aside from the unexploded ordnances.
Yeah. I mean, they did have to sweep the whole area and all the other regions where these jars are, to sweep them of the mines and more of the unexploded ordnances. But it is safe now. When I first traveled through Southeast Asia in 2003, I really wanted to go to Angkor Wat in Cambodia, which is just a few hundred miles away to the south of the Plain of Jars. And you couldn't go there all the way up into, I finally did go in 2003. Sorry, the first time I went through in 1993, it was still pretty much closed off. So then they cleaned up all these sites And so in the last 2 decades, it has been safe to travel there.
Brad will come back and discuss other megalithic sites that you've been to that may have been constructed by giants. Just a reminder, Brad will be speaking at the 2024 Mount Shasta Summer Conference happening July 18th to the 21st, along with Laura Eisenhower. She'll be on the podcast shortly, along with Rob Potter. And you can get more information at thepromiserevealed.net, thepromiserevealed.net, and the link is in the episode description. Back with more of our conversation in a couple minutes. Hi there. If you want to watch the rest of these episodes, please head over to my Rumble channel, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. You can watch complete episodes there. New, complete, unedited episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, the Rumble channel is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. In the meantime, I want to thank you for supporting this YouTube channel all of these years. However, the problem is I never know when I'm going to run afoul of the censors at YouTube. I never know when I'm going to end up in YouTube jail. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. And in fact, 2 more strikes and this YouTube channel will be taken down altogether. So help me fight big tech censorship, enjoy the complete unedited episodes, and join the rest of the Strange Planet community over on Rumble. Again, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet on rumble.com. See you over there. All right, so let's talk about megalithic structures. Where have you been to recently that a megalithic site that you think the evidence points to, possibly being constructed by giants?
Well, of course, Plain of Jars in January, but 5 years ago, I was in South America for 4 months, and that was also the trip that I went down to Antarctica on a sailboat for 26 days, coming in and out of Ushuaia, Argentina. And down there in the southern tip of South America were the Patagonian giants. And they were very well recorded in history, not only for the first time on Magellan's voyage when he found the Magellan Straits between Terra del Fuego and southern Patagonia, but had been depicted by other mariners as the Europeans just coming up to the waist of these Patagonian giants who are basically living in one of the most inhospitable places of the world and barely wearing any clothes at all, just like a loincloth or a tunic of fur. And so they had adapted themselves to one of the most windy and cold climates and didn't even need clothes. And it really freaked out the early European mariners, because once the maps were distributed and copied of Magellan's route, then all the European powers that were sailing around the world, including Sir Francis Drake himself, would follow the course through Magellan Strait, and they would see these bonfires at night and these giants dancing around the bonfire, and it really scared them. And that's where the name Terra del Fuego came from, the land of fire. So I was going down there thinking I'd see volcanoes and stuff. It's not the case. It got the name from these Patagonian giants. So a bit further north, up in mainly in Peru and Bolivia, you have hundreds of megalithic sites. It's the highest concentration of megaliths in the world, especially in the Sacred Valley region where Cuzco and Machu Picchu and Ollantaytambo are located. And it's just, there's just so many, Richard. We're going along in our bus and it's like, wow, look at that one. You hardly blink an eye at some of them because there's so many, but they're really big, and they include these terraces that go up these hillsides at 13,000 feet elevation. boy, we were just getting elevation sickness at 10,000 and 11,000 feet at Cusco. Can you imagine building some of these? And they're made out of megalithic stone. Basically, what that means is very, very large fitted stones. And so when we were in Cusco, first place we went to, there's this church, and the foundations are these really large megalithic stones, not using any mortar at all, but perfectly fitted together. And there's one stone that's quite famous that has 12 angles with fitted megalithic stones on each one of those 12 angles. But it had been subject to earthquakes. And while these megalithic stones do hold up quite well to earthquakes, they're pretty big down in South America. Some of the largest recorded earthquakes in the world happen in South America. And so there were sections of this church that had been rebuilt, first by the Incans. And by the way, Brian Forrester and almost all historians believe that the Incans just showed up and these megalithic structures were there and then just built upon them. And why wouldn't you? Because most of the work was already done. And so the Incans would do their brickwork where some of these walls needed repairing. And you can clearly see it's inferior brickwork. Then the Spanish showed up and they're even more inferior. And when an earthquake happens in modern days, it's the Spanish buildings that come tumbling down. And a lot of the megalithic pre-Incan and Incan structures will withstand.
You mentioned Forrester, and which of course leads us to the Paracas skulls, which are located in it's Peru, right, or is it Bolivia?
Yes.
Do we think the Paracas skulls these were giants, and were they responsible perhaps for these megalithic structures?
Well, they most certainly were, because there's a museum in Paracas that has on display dozens of these elongated skulls. And so when you have about 30% larger cranial capacity in the back, it doesn't matter how much binding or putting a board and reshaping the skull, which is possible, but you can only work with what you have. So in the case of these elongateds, they're 30 to 35% larger cranial capacity than an average human. And then there's other features that make them human-like, but not quite human. For example, there's no central suture crack that all humans have in our skulls. The eye sockets are also 30% larger, as well as the entry of the spinal cord up to the skull is 30% larger. So larger skull, larger body, there you have a giant. Proof right there in Paracas, which was only discovered in the late 1920s. So it's not even 100 years old, but they've dated some of these skulls at being over 3,000 years old. And they found about 300 skulls in this one graveyard in Paracas, Peru. And right there on site is the museum. You can go see it. But there are other museums, and we went to some of them in the Sacred Valley. And right on display are these elongated giant skulls. And some of them are mummified, just like Egyptian mummies, as well as buried with funerary objects.
Where are the rest of the skeletons? Have they been located that go along with these skulls?
So in Paracas, my understanding is they just have the skulls on display. I'm not sure why, but in the museum we visited, they had the whole body, and they were buried in a fetal position and mummified. The one that we saw, and I got a chance to meet the archaeologists who uncovered it, up at 13,000 feet elevation in the Incan royal tombstone area in the royal graveyard. But this particular elongated had his back of his head bashed in. So it was ritually sacrificed, but it was still considered to be in the royal company of other kings and queens that were buried there. And so this founder, and he called it the Huequi, which translates in Spanish as gray. He thought it was closer akin to what we would describe as a gray alien than a human. And indeed, this one had its body intact. The cranium, the head, was as large as the torso. And so even if it was a toddler, the head was as big as the body. And so these things were just massive in size. And had this one grown out, it would have been about 10 to 11 feet tall.
Wow. That's unbelievable. Do you believe that they were hybrids or fully alien, or just another, I don't know, another branch on the evolutionary human tree?
See, that's the big question. And this is why it's an esoteric subject, because this hasn't really been discussed much or told to most of the population. Why don't we learn about this in school? To me, this is one of the most important things you can learn in prehistory. Yet it's in the Bible as the Anunnaki came from heaven. They saw that the earth women were fair. They mated with them. And then they had this Nephilim offspring. I think that's probably the best idea of what these giants were, is some kind of hybrid. Because indeed, Brian Forrester and Klaus Dana have done DNA tests on them and found that they have an earth mother, a matriarchal DNA from an earthly female, but an unknown father DNA that they cannot trace the DNA to anyone here on Earth. So the example I give, and I'll be giving this talk in Mount Shasta about the giants and the megaliths, is that you can take a donkey and a horse, and they can mate and actually have an offspring. It's called a mule. But the mule is sterile. Mm-hmm. The mule is just a one-off. So I would propose perhaps these elongateds were the progeny of a hybrid offspring that maybe couldn't mate, that they were born, they were huge. And by the way, in some of the museums, such as up in Tiwanaku, they'll show you these elongated skulls, but they'll say in the case of humans, they have a whole exhibit about binding the heads that the Incans would try to copy to bind their heads, to make themselves look elongated and wear the clothes of the royals to copy the look and feel of these giants. So they must have been quite impressive to the more diminutive Incan people in size and stature, so that they would have been revered as living gods and given this status of being buried in some of these royal tombs as well.
Right. This idea of cradle boarding, I guess they called it. I've never heard an explanation, as to, why would a culture do this, to deliberately, distort their features in this way. They must have been emulating something. And yet, the traditional or orthodox explanations never really sort of go there.
Right. And you got to ask yourself why. And we've had many giants found in the United States and Canada over the years when they're digging up these mound sites. And here's a giant bone buried with funerary objects. Even where I live now out in northwestern Nevada is the ancient Lake Lahontan, which all around the high level watermark are these caves like the Lovelock Cave and Spirit Cave, where they found giants 100 years ago. Unfortunately, there wasn't much effort at preservation or putting them on display, but some of the artifacts, including size 26 sandals, ginormous sandals for these giants in northwestern Nevada, are still on display, as well as some of their weaved duck decoys. So much so that they call it the Lovelock culture, because it doesn't correspond with the Paiute Indian or any other native tribes. So the legend of the giants still lives on, but it's kind of in this veiled sort of way that you have to do some digging to get to the meat of the matter. And it's very, very difficult to find any of the skeleton remains here in North America. And this is what we regard as Smithsonian Gate, that the Smithsonian would come in. And I give a description in my book, Beyond Esoteric, in a chapter called Suppressed Human Origins, where there was a very professional dig near where I grew up at Lake Delavan in southern Wisconsin. And these archaeologists from Beloit College are out there doing everything by the book. And it started making the local newspapers. Then it got into the Madison, Wisconsin newspaper. Then it got into the New York Times. As soon as it got national attention, the Smithsonian Institute shows up at the dig site and they kind of flash their badge like the FBI. All right, we're taking over here. And they said, wait. We've been working on this for quite a while. We want to take it to completion. No, we'll take care of it. We'll finish it and we'll share our results with you. Well, they followed up a month or two later. Beloit College professor says, hey, what happened with those giants we dug up? Contacted the Smithsonian. They said, we don't know what you're talking about. We don't have any giant bones here. So the rumor was that they were just taking them out to the Atlantic Ocean and just dumping them, just out of sight, out of mind, because it doesn't fit the narrative. And then, of course, in the 19th century, when we were expanding across this continent, the Native American people were viewed as a nuisance. And they didn't want to give them any more credit because they wanted to take the land. They wanted to conquer this country, manifest destiny. And so everything concerning Native Americans or even the giants and their culture really got sidelined and marginalized to being nothing more than just a myth or noble savages. That's about the best we could do, calling the Native American people in the 19th century.
Well, that's going to be some talk, Brad, at the 2024 Mount Shasta Summer Conference happening July 18th to the 21st at the Methodist Camp in beautiful Mount Shasta. Kind of an off-the-grid affair, minimal technology. Go and camp and enjoy nature, and some amazing speakers, including yourself, and of course Laura Eisenhower, Rob Potter. And people can go to, listeners can go to thepromiserevealed.net for more information and to order tickets. Brad, great to catch up with you again, and thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, Richard. We will be giving our presentations inside a building, so we'll have our PowerPoint set up. It's not all going to be out in nature, but yeah, again, if you use Brad in the promo code, you can get a discount that way. And check out my books at cccpublishing.com or my conference schedule at bradolsen.com. And would love to see you at one of these conferences one of these days, Richard.
One day. I would love to. All of those links, incidentally, are in the episode description, so check them out. Brad, we'll talk again soon, I hope. All the best.
Sounds great, Richard. Thanks for having me on.
Hi there. If you want to watch the rest of these episodes, please head over to my Rumble channel, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. You can watch complete episodes there. New, complete, unedited episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, the Rumble channel is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. In the meantime, I want to thank you for supporting this YouTube channel all of these years. However, the problem is I never know when I'm going to run afoul of the censors at YouTube. I never know when I'm going to end up in YouTube jail. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. And in fact, 2 more strikes and this YouTube channel will be taken down altogether. So help me fight big tech censorship, enjoy the complete unedited episodes, and join the rest of the Strange Planet community over on Rumble. Again, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet on rumble.com. See you over there. Hey friends, welcome to another installment of Strange Planet. And if you'd like to get a little deeper into Strange Planet, consider becoming a premium subscriber. It's real easy to do, and you gain access to commercial-free listening, special bonus episodes produced exclusively for premium subscribers. You also receive my monthly newsletter, Inner Sanctum. Just go to the link in the episode description, strangeplanet.com. strangeplanet.supportingcast.fm, strangeplanet.supportingcast.fm. All right, on this episode, no book of the Bible has enchanted its readers quite like the book of Revelation. Its fantastical language of fierce dragons, seven-headed beasts, warring angels, and a new heaven and new earth has captivated humanity for nearly 2,000 years. Interestingly, no book of the Bible has confused and frustrated its readers like the book of Revelation. Herein lies the glaring problem, the interpretive elephant in the room. Can anyone really know what it all means? Well, we're going to get some help in that regard right now with the author of Gate of the Gods. Tyler Gilreath is an avid Bible researcher, engaging writer, and the author of Gospel Over Gods, as well as a dynamic speaker. Tyler, welcome to Strange Planet. How are you?
I'm doing very well, and I appreciate the introduction, Richard. Been looking forward to getting on your program and talking about one of the most exciting books ever written, the book of Revelation. And so I'm excited about the content of the book, and I'm excited about our conversation.
I'm Greek Orthodox, married into the Greek Orthodox faith, and this is the one book in the Bible that is never read, let's see, from during the liturgy. I guess right. Because the fathers of the Orthodox Church felt that it was given to such different interpretations and so forth, that at one point they just decided, let's just steer clear of it. And yet at the same time, I mean, I grew up in the Protestant faith and understand that prophecy is so important. I mean, I think something like 2/3 of the Bible is prophecy. So first of all, just kind of a general question, and that is, why is the book of Revelation so cryptic? I mean, we know that Jesus spoke in parables, and sometimes the Bible is allegorical and metaphorical, but I mean, this is above and beyond. It's so cryptic. Why do you think it was written that way?
Well, first, Revelation is the pinnacle of all prophecy. I mean, it is. It's the last book in the Bible. Genesis is the beginning, Revelation is the end. You have two bookends that are very important, and sandwiched in between is the history of the world, secrets about the hidden realm and eternity and the afterlife, and the supernatural war. And there's so much to unpack and to digest. And one of the reasons Revelation is problematic, and quite honestly, one of the reasons why we run from Revelation, even those that are maybe in positions of authority in various churches, and I'll tell you, I ran from Revelation for at least a decade in my own ministry, and it wasn't until I got the supernatural worldview in mind that I felt like I was able to approach the most supernatural book in the Bible. But it is avoided because it is mysterious, and it's difficult to parse and understand what in the world is going on in the book of Revelation. And so what I discovered in my journey of trying to unravel this mystery is that there is a consistent theme or a consistent way in which the book is written. It is apocalyptic literature, but more importantly than that, Richard, the book has a template behind it. Okay, and that's one of the things I talk about very early in the book. And I knew, if there's a way to figure out the template, then there's a way to, parse the language, right? And so this should give your readers a lot of comfort, and those in, positions of authority in various churches, denominations, that there is a way we can approach the book almost like scientifically, except it's theology, okay? And the secret to the book of Revelation is the Old Testament, believe it or not. I was shocked when I realized what was happening in Revelation. Revelation is almost like a composite of myriads of scriptures scattered throughout the Old Testament. In other words, John did see the things in the book. We're not saying that, but we're saying that he does blender theology. In other words, you like to make a smoothie. You put in the bananas, you put in the blueberries or the peanut butter, and you hit the start button, and what comes out is this delicious, smoothie. Well, that's what John does with Revelation. He takes phrases, themes, sections of scripture, he throws it into a blender, and what comes out is the apocalypse of Jesus Christ. Okay. And that's by design. Okay. All scripture works together. There's no competing agenda in scripture. And so it makes sense, Richard, that if Revelation ends the Bible, then why not use, various scriptures or various themes or various phrases throughout the biblical narrative and infuse those into the book of Revelation?
I guess that's what's meant by the Old Testament is the New Testament concealed, and the New Testament is the Old Testament revealed.
Exactly. You're exactly right. Now, we've picked up on that before, scholars, regular Christian folks, but historically, Revelation has not been considered to be a part of that camp. And the reason is, there's some books of the Bible that's very obvious, like Hebrews, for example. That's a book of the Bible that everybody knows is chock full of Old Testament, ideas and thoughts and scriptures. It's clear when Jesus quotes the Old Testament because he'll say, "It is said," or "Did Moses not say," or "It is written," and that kind of clues in the reader, hey, we're about to get an Old Testament reference. But in Revelation, there's none of that. There's no introductory remarks where John or Jesus says it is written. You get none of that in there. And so the reason why this has flown under the radar is because we're, as a society, as a whole in Christendom, we're not really that familiar with our Old Testaments. And even those that have been pastors and preachers, and you have to go searching for this stuff. Like, again, there's no introductory remark that hits you upside the head and say, pay attention, we're about to quote Deuteronomy. You have to really look at words and phrases. And those things matter because, for example, the way Jesus gets described in Revelation is with terms that get applied to Yahweh in the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. Okay. And there's a reason for that. Jesus is not the bad boy. He's not second string. He's not lesser than Yahweh, right? Revelation sees Jesus, the Messiah, the King of Kings, as ascending to the throne, having all authority. And so it makes sense when we start parsing all the language that describes Jesus, we can say, oh, that's from Isaiah or that's from Daniel. And those descriptions, the snowy white hair, the eyes like fire, all those things were said of Yahweh in the Old Testament, and now they're said of Jesus. I'll give you another example. In the beginning of Revelation, Jesus addresses the 7 churches of Asia Minor. Mm-hmm. One thing I talk about early in the book is that his primary rebuke is idolatry. Now, it doesn't just come out and say that with all the churches. I think maybe one kind of says that specifically, but most of the time you don't get that. Most of the time you get, hey, you're acting like Balaam. There's some Nicolaitans of Balaam there. Balaam was a false prophet who tried to lead God's people into idolatry. And so that little small context clue clues you in on what is going on there in the church. Another one might be you have a Jezebel figure in the church there. Jezebel was also, an evil woman that would lead people into idolatry. And so again, when we begin to understand that these conflations or associations with Old Testament figures or contexts matter, then we can begin to unravel the mystery, piece by piece. Hopefully that makes sense.
It does. So is that the cipher that you're referring to when you talk about the template and the parallels between Revelation and the Old Testament, books of the Old Testament? Is that the cipher?
That's the cipher. Yeah. If we can pair what's being said in any given verse with an Old Testament reference point, it really opens up the meaning, what's really being said that's not being said. So that is a cipher. That's the key. That's the template, the blueprints to understanding the language in the book of Revelation.
So talk to me about the importance of Babylonian creation literature and how that can help us understand the book of Revelation.
So that's the second thing I do in the book. Number one, I go over the Old Testament template, but then number two, there's a Babylonian flair, or also almost template, that's infused in the book. Now, this kind of gets into some broader questions, and we may get into that in just a minute. But the reason it matters, Richard, is because the enemy, the cosmic enemy in the book of Revelation, is Babylon, Babylon the Great. And it has been debated for centuries. Who is Babylon the Great? And historically, Rome has been Babylon the Great, explained as Babylon the Great. Mm-hmm. And I'm not denying that that Rome was not a latter-day Babylon, because it was. But one thing I talk about in the book at length is that Babylon the Great is bigger than Rome. Babylon the Great are supernatural entities that derive from the Tower of Babel event. Okay, and so I'll answer your question in just a minute about the creation, but we have to kind of lay the backdrop to this. I feel like it's important. Mm-hmm. There are three supernatural wars in the Bible. My first book, Gospel Over Gods, takes you through that narrative of the three divine rebellions. The first one's the serpent in the Garden of Eden. The second one is the angels who fell in the days of Noah, right. Or they're all
Genesis 6.
Genesis 6, 1 through 4. And then the third are the sons of God, or the angels of God, who were assigned nations, who were entrusted with the tutelage and care of nations in Deuteronomy 32, 8 and 9.
Except for Israel, and God said, "This one is mine."
Yeah, he said, "That's mine." And so Michael was kind of the prince over Israel. God, of course, they belong to God. But Babel's angels, those angels are the engine of chaos in the book of Revelation. So how does that connect with what you asked me? Babel is inseparable from the Babylon event, or Babylon is separable from the Babel event. In other words, you can trace the lineage and history from Babel to Babylon, okay? And so if Babylon is the cosmic enemy in the book of Revelation, it makes sense why John would use Babylonian literature throughout the book, because we are dismantling the ideologies of Babylon, we're dismantling their gods, we're dismantling their religious system. And so part of that deconstruction is Babylonian creation stories. And the primary one is Enuma Elish. Enuma Elish tells how the high god Marduk, king of the gods at Babylon, became king of the gods. He defeated Chaos, Tiamat, which was a sea dragon, and split Tiamat in two, and basically recreated the cosmos after that, and became king of the gods. It's funny, Richard. I know this is a sidetrack, but it's funny. I just got through watching a movie, the new King Kong Godzilla movie.
Yes.
Have you seen those?
Not yet. I mean, I've seen the kitschy ones from the 1960s, but not the.
It's amazing that in a lot of these newer movies, they're using some of these figures. The Titans, or Tiamat, I just described, is one of the chaos monsters in the movie. But this is a part of a very ancient conversation about how creation happened and who created it.
Right. Just a quick interjection here. Your colleague at Defender Publishing, Donna Howell, and her late father, one of the last books I believe it was the last book that he wrote with Donna, talks about before Genesis and that first creation event before, Adam and Eve, and the Leviathans and the Titans and chaos. So I think that's what you're referring to here.
It is. And so the Enuma Elish were, I believe, 7 tablets of creation that were discovered in the library of Ashurbanipal. And essentially, that was the narrative in Babylon on how the world got started. And so Revelation uses chaos monsters throughout the book. Okay. Again, this whole thing is God versus Babylon, or the Messiah versus Babylon. And so part of the way that we deconstruct Babylon is to use their literature against them. It's polemic theology. And so that's why Babylonian creation is important. And not only Babylonian creation, but other Babylonian literature as well is in the book of Revelation. Babylonian astrology is also extremely important in the book of Revelation.
Tyler, I'm going to jump in here. We'll get to Babylonian astrology right after this quick timeout. Gate of the Gods. Back with more of our conversation right after these. Hi there. If you want to watch the rest of these episodes, please head over to my Rumble channel, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. You can watch complete episodes there. New, complete, unedited episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, the Rumble channel is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. In the meantime, I want to thank you for supporting this YouTube channel all of these years. However, the problem is I never know when I'm going to run afoul of the censors at YouTube. I never know when I'm going to end up in YouTube jail. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. And in fact, 2 more strikes and this YouTube channel will be taken down altogether. So help me fight big tech censorship, enjoy the complete unedited episodes, and join the rest of the Strange Planet community over on Rumble. Again, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet on rumble.com. See you over there. And we are back. Tyler Gilreath, Gate of the Gods, the follow-up to his best-selling book, Gospel Over Gods. So we need to understand a little bit of Babylonian astrology and how that helps us understand Revelation better.
You're exactly right. And so we talked about before the break, Richard, how Babylonian literature as a whole plays a part in the book of Revelation, because John, Jesus, they are deconstructing Babylon at its very foundation, which is its literature, just like the Bible. And so Babylonian astrology is really the beginning of astrology. It's where it all begins. And we discovered a set of 70 ancient tablets called the Enuma Anu Enlil. Those 70 tablets were essentially the manual or the lexicon of the ancient world on what in the world the stars mean when they have various motions. And so there's a few passages in Revelation that scholars call essentially astral prophecies, prophecies that have to do with alignments in the sky and the stars. And they're very mysterious. And some of them involve the 4 horsemen. Some of them in Revelation involve basically the birth of Jesus. A dragon in the sky is kind of getting ready to devour the child as it falls from the woman in the sky. And again, those make a little bit of sense, but they make a whole lot of sense when we use the Enuma Anu Enlil to parse the language. And so again, some of that mystery, we can dispel it. We can embrace with clarity what is written when we use and tap into that Babylonian divination manual or handbook on what these things mean. And so there is consistency there. Now, some of the pushback on this may be, well, Babylon and Babylonian teachings were, probably out of the way when John wrote Revelation. Well, that's not true, Richard. Babylonian astrology survived well into the 4th century. And so, again, we moderns struggle to understand the things in the sky. Now, we're just coming off a big event in 2024, a solar eclipse. Mm-hmm. So we're mindful of, hey, what is happening, in the sky, and what does it mean? And we may go about our business and our lives will continue. But to the ancient person, that was very much their life. What is happening in the sky will dictate, according to the Enuma Anu Enlil, what you're supposed to be doing, what you're supposed to be thinking, what you're supposed to be praying, what your God wants you to know. And so there were 7,000 scenarios given in these 70 tablets. And those 7,000 scenarios were the driving force behind ancient life. And so John, his readers, were very familiar with astral language, astral prophecy, and they would have undoubtedly understood that because of Babylonian literature.
If I could make it just a quick aside here, it's not necessarily directly connected to what we're talking about right now. It is in Revelation, and you mentioned Jesus' letters to the 7 churches. And I'm not sure if the church is in Pergamum, but he refers to, in one of these letters, he refers to the throne of, I think he calls it out, the throne of Zeus in Pergamum, which some have suggested, or maybe he actually calls out the throne of Satan. The throne of Zeus is the throne of Satan in Pergamum.
Right.
How does that figure into this?
You're exactly right. Scholars look to several things and say it could be this. There were several artifacts that were discovered, archaeological findings. The one that seems most promising is the Pergamum altar, and that is actually in a place of history. I forget the location, but you can actually go see that.
It's in Germany.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Germany. Some interesting history behind that that you may be aware of, and your readers may. Adolf Hitler, who hated the Jews very much, he made a exact replica of the Pergamum altar. It was a stage of sorts. Mm-hmm. It had a lot of iconography engraved on it, and that was the stage from which Hitler preached. And so it had a lot of again, satanic messaging. Hitler wanted to exterminate the Jews. He was offering them as a sacrifice. He brought the Jews in on cattle carts like they were cattle to be sacrificed. He brought them in to a place, Auschwitz, which many believe means holy place. So he would, again, bring them in as cattle to be slaughtered while pushing the message, the satanic message of Satan on the throne of Satan, or a replica of the throne of Satan. So you're right. There was a lot of satanic, emblematic things and objects that were a part of the ancient world, including the altar of Pergamum.
So let's talk about the 4 horsemen and who they are exactly.
So the 4 horsemen, again, it goes back to understanding some of the language that is in the Enuma Anu Enlil, some of the language in Babylonian astrology. And I'll talk about that. I believe it starts on page 103 in the book. And actually go through and kind of reveal some of the names, or the names behind the 4 horsemen. Because the Bible doesn't really name all of them. It just gives context clues. And what I mean by that is it may refer to a direction, a cardinal direction, or it may refer to a color of a horse. And why that's important, Richard, is because, again, in Babylonian literature, certain deities got associated with certain colors. certain planets, and certain cardinal directions. And so when we have that information in mind and we begin to look at the language of the four horsemen, then we can come away with who these figures are. And so the rider on the white horse would be Marduk. Again, I mentioned him a minute ago. He is the savior figure, if you will, the king of the gods in the Enuma Anu, or the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation story. He is the counter to Jesus on the white horse, who is the true Messiah and the true Savior of the world. You have on the red horse, Nabu; on the black horse, Ninurta; on the pale horse, Nergal. And let me take you through some of these piece by piece here. So just to kind of illustrate to the listeners what's happening in the text, what's going on. Essentially, when you look at the black horse, we'll just consider that one for a minute.
Yeah, pestilence. That's pestilence, right? Famine.
Revelation says, I looked, and behold, there was a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. Okay, well, the color black is associated with, again, the constellation Scorpio. And, well, that makes sense. Scorpio has two claws, which could be seen as, two scales on his hand. And the god Ninurta is associated with Scorpio, the color black, the planet Saturn, in the direction of west. And so, that makes total sense. Another one would be, let's see here. Another one would be Nergal. South is connected with the constellation Leo. Nergal was king of the netherworld, of death, the king of death, king connected with wild animals, death, and pestilence. There was a pale horse. The name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades who followed him. And so, again, it makes sense when we begin to understand, okay, this death figure, underworld figure, gets associated with this color and this planet and this direction. And so, again, black is associated with the Ninurta and following. So I may have said that wrong on one of them. I may have misspoke. But essentially, in the book, I lay out line by line and explain, why these get connected. And so the one that is of most interest to me and is most important, I believe, is Marduk.
That's the white horseman. That's the white horseman, which is like conquest, right?
Exactly. That's the white horse. And it is said of him in the book of Revelation that essentially he's holding a bow and arrow. He's ready to conquer and to conquest. That's important because, again, the color white is associated with Marduk. Marduk was king of the gods. He became king of the gods by shooting an arrow at Tiamat, splitting Tiamat in two. And again, Marduk is the arch rival of the Messiah in the book of Revelation. I bring up Marduk throughout the book. Marduk is a big part of what is actually written. Marduk is mentioned in Jeremiah 50, Jeremiah 51. Sometimes he gets called Bel, not Baal, like B-A-A-L, but B-E-L. That is Marduk. Marduk is framed as the liberator of the possessed, a savior of the downtrodden. And so, sadly, Richard, this has led many people to conclude that 3 of the riders are demonic and 1 is not. But that is dark deception at the core. Again, they're all 4 demonic. They're all, part of the powers of darkness, and they all have Babylonian roots. And so that is such a huge part of what's in Revelation, because at the end of Revelation, Richard, Jesus does something that's very polemic. He pokes Marduk in the eye at the end of the book of Revelation. At the end of the book of Revelation, when chaos is conquered, like Marduk supposedly did with Tiamat. What does the Bible say the Messiah will do? It says he will create a new heavens and new earth. Well, that's exactly what Marduk claimed to have done in the ancient world. And so the Messiah is very much interested in tearing down Babylonian ideology, Babylonian lore, Babylonian deities. In other words, anything you can do, Marduk, I can do better. And that's exactly what is, Jesus, that's the way Jesus is positioned in the book of Revelation. And so that's extremely powerful, that we understand that no stone will be turned not to ruin. I mean, everything will be obliterated. It would be rubble when the Messiah gets done with Babylon. And again, that is missing in a lot of people's minds when they read the book of Revelation. They're not thinking cosmically. They're thinking Rome. But the thing is, Rome is no more. And so the question is Babylon still around? And if people are honest, they would say, well, yeah, Babylon's still here. Okay, who is Babylon? And where did they come from? And why do they need to be destroyed?
Well, we'll pick up on that on the other side, Tyler. Gate of the Gods. Tyler Gilreath stays with us, back with more of Strange Planet right after these. Hi there. If you want to watch the rest of these episodes, please head over to my Rumble channel, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. You can watch complete episodes there. New, complete, unedited episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, the Rumble channel is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. In the meantime, I want to thank you for supporting this YouTube channel all of these years. However, the problem is I never know when I'm going to run afoul of the censors at YouTube. I never know when I'm going to end up in YouTube jail. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. And in fact, 2 more strikes and this YouTube channel will be taken down altogether. So help me fight big tech censorship, enjoy the complete unedited episodes, and join the rest of the Strange Planet community over on Rumble. Again, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet on rumble.com. See you over there. Tyler Gilreath, author of Gospel Over Gods and the follow-up, Gate of the Gods, Revelation, the Messiah, and the Second Coming of Babylon. So just to clarify, for those who believe that Revelation was actually referring to events that have already occurred, Rome is Babylon. The second the destruction of the second temple in 70 A.D. and so forth, that's what Revelation was really referring to. You would argue that it's prophesying future events. Is that fair?
I'm arguing in the book that it doesn't disclude or shouldn't disclude the cosmic conversation. The cosmic conversation is ongoing. It hasn't stopped. And so a lot of times what people like to do on both camps, they say it's either or, it's either all about Rome or it's all about, supernatural entities. And I'm saying that it can be about both. But Rome was a modern day puppet, and the gods of Babel were pulling the strings like a marionette. And so throughout history, new Romes have, risen and taken their place. But again, who's pulling the strings, Richard? It is supernatural forces. And Asaph said it well in Psalm 82, that famous song about the gods over the nations, the gods of Babylon. At the end of Psalm 82, the psalmist is calling on Yahweh to deliver the nations. back to God, back to himself. And one thing that is said in Psalm 82 is, I said, therefore, you are gods, all of you, sons of the Most High. Nevertheless, like mortals or like men, you will die. I'm saying in the book of Revelation, this is a cosmic conversation about how the gods die and how chaos dies. And without that context, we are missing so much of what is said in the apocalypse.
So Babylon is still around. Some refer to the Chaldean dynasty as the Neo-Babylonian dynasty. Is that what we're talking about? The I don't know, the modern day or the descendants of the Chaldeans?
We're talking about the supernatural forces that were behind the Chaldean beliefs, the Babylonian beliefs. Again, the origin point for all of this is the Tower of Babel event. From that point, it was Yahweh versus the nations, Israel versus the nations, Yahweh versus their gods. And so these are the same entities, Richard, that Paul describes as principalities and powers in the heavenly places. Those are terms of cosmic geography. Those are terms of location. And so, again, how is God, how is the Messiah going to bring them to nothing? How is he going to end the chaos? And that's what much of the apocalypse is about, you know, and it makes sense because if we read the Bible like a story, then there has to be a resolution to these chaotic and, you know, rebels that have ruined the world and ruined the nations and ran them into darkness and into the ground. And Revelation, very beautifully, mysteriously, but it makes a whole lot more sense how all this gets described when we keep in our mind's eye Babylon the Great is being driven by supernatural forces that have to be brought to nothing. And without that, we are missing the depth and the riches that the early church would have understood when they read the book of Revelation.
The book is often used to predict future geopolitical events, or they look at current geopolitical events and find reference to those in Revelation. Does Revelation point to future geopolitical events and end times, or are we talking supernaturally, cosmically here about the events in Revelation?
I think there's room for both. In my book, I don't really get into the geopolitical aspect. There's been hundreds of books written on that. My focus is the cosmic, the supernatural world. But one thing I'll say in response to that is a consistent thread we see woven into the tapestry of the Bible is that when there is war on earth, there is war in heaven. And when there is war in heaven, there is war on earth.
Gate of the Gods, Revelation, the Messiah, and the second coming of Babylon. Is Revelation ultimately good news?
It's good news for the redeemed. It's good news for the saved. It's good news for those who have given their loyalty to the Messiah, who is the true King of Kings. It's a celebration of sorts. One thing I talk about in the book, going back to the Babylonian chaos monsters, is that early Second Temple Jews, early Christians, viewed the dying behemoth or the dying Leviathan as a supper to be enjoyed by all in the eschaton. In other words, when chaos and the dragons are slayed, man, we're all just going to have a big meal. We're all just going to have a big feast. And so it is good news. It's good news because, you know, this thing that we desperately want, we want to be like the resurrected Jesus. We want to shed our mortal bodies. We want to enjoy his presence. there's something and someone standing in our way, and it is Babylon the Great. And when that is finally thrown down, Richard, when that is finally put away, then we can return to an Edenic plan that God had for humanity, to live together in unison with his human family, his supernatural family coming together in a utopia, paradise atmosphere where there is no sin and there is no death. So it is the best news. It is how the story of the good news ends. And I encourage your readers to dig deeper, not only into my book, but into other books that help bring the apocalypse to life.
Tyler, appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Gate of the Gods, Revelation, the Messiah, and the Second Coming of Babylon. Hi there. If you want to watch the rest of these episodes, please head over to my Rumble channel, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. You can watch complete episodes there. New, complete, unedited episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, the Rumble channel is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. In the meantime, I want to thank you for supporting this YouTube channel all of these years. However, the problem is I never know when I'm going to run afoul of the censors at YouTube. I never know when I'm going to end up in YouTube jail. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. And in fact, 2 more strikes and this YouTube channel will be taken down altogether. So help me fight big tech censorship, enjoy the complete unedited episodes, and join the rest of the Strange Planet community over on Rumble. Again, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet on rumble.com. See you over there.